Hello, all of you people out in manager land. This is Judy McKenzie, and I am the author of the upcoming book, The People Manager, The Effective Strategies for Those Who Manage People. You say, not another management book. There are so many of them. This one is different. Hey, Elaine, welcome. The reason this book is different than many of the others is that I have taken all of the best concepts that I've worked with over the years and I've put them into one book. So, you know, when I was doing my research for the different sections of the book, I had to, hi Joanne, I had to pull out, you know, my floor is covered. I could actually show you, but it might make you feel a little wobbly in your tummy with all the books that are all over the floor. Because a good manager is a combination of so many skills. So let's talk also why I'm interested in what good managers are all about. And maybe it would be helpful if I gave you a distinction between the working definition that I have for manager and the working definition I have for a leader, because they often get overlapped, and that's understandable. So a manager is, their role is a narrower role. It is usually, it can be a division, it can be a group, it can be a team. It is a portion of an organization, where a leader's role is broader, and often we'll have regions or you know, all the different components of production or sales or some of those kinds of things. The accountability for a manager is a bit narrower. Now that probably won't feel like that if you're a manager. It doesn't likely feel very much like your accountability is narrower, but it is a bit narrower. It's specifically designed for one or a few outcomes of a product or service that is managed within your department, where a leader is responsible for a much wider accountability in terms of you know, corporate performance and the strategy of that corporate performance. The manager has a larger day-to-day component, where they are actually managing people who are functioning on the floor, if you will, to make sure that a product or service is getting out the door to the customer. Where, pardon me, a leader has more the overall strategy, and although has some managers to manage, but they are expecting that getting work done through others to be done through the manager. So the manager really is a significant cog in the production and service wheel within an organization. And, you know, sort of for the last, there's all kinds of distinctions, but I wanted to talk about the most significant ones. The other is the influence. The manager is able to influence the team directly, and that's huge. It is just huge, because in the work I do and the conversations I have with people all the time, the teams and the managers are really struggling. And the one thing I wanted to say today is that, you know, management has not changed. It's not changed. It's always been this. Although I think it was a lot easier when the authoritarian rule was accepted. Nobody was happier, and the work wasn't getting done, but there was a sense of power that a manager had that now is not so much. There isn't that same sense of power for a manager. Sometimes managers forget that, and they want to tout power where they need more persuasive communication skills. So I've made some notes. I want to make sure that I cover everything that I want to talk about. I have some strong feelings, and I've got strong in brackets because if you know me, I have strong feelings about many things, but I have strong feelings about the capabilities that are required to do management. And competencies is on one of my no-fly list for words that has been overused, and people's eyes roll into their head. There's a whole bunch of words that I was journaling the other day, and there's like a whole bunch of words like transparency and things like that I just wish would be put into a nice, safe, dark place for a couple of years until we all forget it, and then you can bring them back out. Because they're good words. They've just been overused, and they're often overused by people who are trying to convince you that they're doing that, but it's usually the opposite. So, to make a successful manager, I'm going to describe for you what successful managers look like. All right, and you can chime in. You can put comments in. I'm very happy to. The whole concept of Facebook Live is to be participatory, but it gets a little bit tricky because you have to type. But anyway, so a good managers. I was having lunch with a friend of mine yesterday, and we were talking about what good managers look like, and good managers. They really create an environment where people like to come to work. They like to come to work. It's not that work is their very favorite thing, but the teams have a very positive feel about them. They're doing hard work, but they're doing it collectively. There isn't a lot of gossipy, negative stuff. There isn't a lot of backstabby material because a good manager has a real spidey sense of what the ambience of the team is. And you can get that by just walking around. You don't have to do anything complex to get that information. You just have to be aware and listen. So in these environments, also, what I also find interesting is that I'm very fidgety today, I'm sorry, where a really good manager, they're often thought of as the go-to managers, and they get worked right down to a nub because everybody knows they can count on them. Their teams work so effectively together. They know that the manager will they may be handed a task. They have no idea how to do it, but they know that manager with their team is going to be able to figure it out, and not only figure it out, but execute on it. And so your go-to managers, those are generally really good managers if they're able to execute on the issues or on the challenges that are given. Go-to managers and solid managers, successful managers, they're the ones that people want to work in their business units because their people are learning and growing all the time. The manager does not hold a judgmental component to them. It is an environment of creative learning. And creative learning is not, you're saying, how can a manager do all this? They've got all this work to do. Well, how can they not, is my thinking. How can you not take the time to create an environment that will continue on and gain a life of its own in a positive way if you set it up in such a way where negativity is not tolerated, creativity is encouraged. Staff coming to a manager and saying, I can't figure it out. Creating an environment where your direct report comes to you with, here, I've thought about this, and this, but something's just not sitting right. Then you can have a conversation. And what you've done is you've encouraged a good thinking partner, as opposed to a staff member saying, I can't figure it out. And, of course, you probably have had some experience and you could throw them in the right direction, but where would the learning be? And you're going to be doing that time and time again. And when I hear managers who are talking about, oh my gosh, I don't even like these people anymore because they demand so much from me. I can't get anything done because I'm always dealing with nonsense behavior. Well, that's a pretty good indication that you need some support and guidance and tools on how to transition your management skill into something that is certainly much more sustainable. All right, so now I'm going to talk about what a weak manager looks like, and it follows the logic of it's pretty much the opposite. But weak managers, they often, their problem solving is limited. They don't, and the reason I say that, because that's not a particularly nice thing to say, but they don't understand how to make complex subjects or issues, how to break them down and to make them into something more simple and doable. That has been that's a primary issue that I see with managers who are struggling in that role. They have a tendency to they have a knee-jerk reaction. So if something is said, they respond very quickly, often without thinking it through. And once it's out there, it's very hard to pull it back. And sometimes what's out there is a negative criticism or judgment or something like that. And relationships get, they're very fragile in a workplace because you have control over some people's lives in a way from when there's a paycheck involved. So also weak managers, they don't have a philosophy of management, or if they do, it's, people are lazy and need to be managed, or you can't trust people. And people have those thoughts. I know it sounds horrible, but they do have those thoughts, and a very large majority of managers who've had, because they've had challenges in the past with managing people, and people can be difficult if they're not sure what the responsibilities and accountabilities are, and you have to start off right from day one setting a standard. So that's what weak managers are easy to see because there's so many of them. There's so very many of them. Now, in keeping, I do want to keep this this session quite short because I think sound bites of information are a lot more helpful. So often managers, and we've always kidded about this, where managers are hired using the 7-foot pole principle and the Darwinian principle. You hire them, you give them lots of space, and the strong survive. And, so companies will often invest in training programs, and a trainee will come in and teach some very fundamental kinds of things, and that's fantastic, except it's not relevant to the issues that they have day to day. And that's why my idea is that the best ways or the most effective, cost-effective, and experientially and relevancy perspective way to deal with growing managerial skills is through group coaching, where managers work on very specific work-related issues, and individual coaching for those managers that might have to develop some of the foundational things. And because the regular generic training material often gives a good tidbit of information, and all that information can be pulled into into the leadership work. So let me give you an example. I was working with a company in Vancouver, and we're working with actually a manager in the financial area, and she was flaming out big time. She was micromanaging, and her team, she couldn't keep team members on board. Work wasn't getting done, and she was starting to get really sick because she was actually doing everybody's work and then was off for an extended period of time while she was recovering. And they felt that, the company felt that she had some, she had some capability, but she just couldn't, get out of this micromanaging. Excuse me for 1 second. Anyway, I was brought in to see if I could help her to reduce this micromanaging, and with the hope that we could get out of some of the high turnover issues and dissatisfaction. So, it took a little while to gain her trust, and once we were able to develop that relationship and have a conversation about, teaching rather than doing, and asking rather than telling, it turns out that the company had done some really fantastic Blanchard training on, the different kinds of what different staff need at different times in terms of supervision. And that's a tool that I work a lot with. And so I was able to, she had gone through that a couple years before and hadn't even cracked the binder, which is not uncommon. She said she was in and out of the training because, of course, she had to do so much of her staff's work. So that's an example of we were able to pull that work that had been done within the organization. It had a whole new meaning to her because we made it very relevant. So that's the kinds of things that, if as an organization you've provided your people with tons of training, that's great. We'll use that, pull it in. So to finish off, I want to go through, I have 8 qualities. You're going, oh my God, 8 qualities, but all these qualities, with the exception of one, are so easy to teach and easy to learn. Each of these skills, and all the different key areas of, I'm going to say competencies, capabilities, they all have a different range in their teachableness. So, everything from 1 to 10. Some things are very difficult to teach, and some things are much easier to teach. So I'm going to tell you where they fit into the spectrum of teachability. And the reason I even talk about that is that some of these things, if it's a very high thing to teach, hire somebody with it. Don't assume you're going to teach that skill. All right? So let's start out. And this is Judy McKenzie, 25 plus years experience as a human resource executive, coach, consultant, been around the block, made many mistakes, learned from them, gone forward, and actually like people and have a lot of interest in helping people do a better job. That's where I'm coming from. So the first thing is a non-judgmental communication style. And that is huge. But you know what? That's a very easy thing to teach. So when I talk about, I'm going to use low, medium, and high, I'm working on, you can't see my hands, that continuum from 1 to 10, okay? So low would be, 3.5 and down. All right. So the next thing is managers, people, when you want to put them in a manager role, they really actually have to like people. They have to have some basic trust that people want to do a good job, and they're not lazy and they are not dishonest. You have to like people. Now that is a little bit more difficult to teach. That's a medium level. So that's around a 5. So you might want to keep an eye on that. The next one is decision-making skills and command skills. And I put those two together because a manager has to be able to make a decision. They can't get all caught up in the weeds and not not be able to, cull the information that's important and make a decision. And the command skills is, do they, do they look like they could be trusted? If they've got twitchy eyes, or they can't look at people, or they are hemming and hawing and they don't seem to be sure, well, they're going to have some issues with command skills. That's also a medium level, so that's around a 5. It's not impossible. I can teach medium level. The high, I'd say don't teach by those skills. The next one is managing and measuring work, understanding what needs to be done within the organization and being able to manage it effectively. And in my book, one of the very first chapters, so you have a vacancy in your organization. What do you do with it? Do you immediately fill it using the same job description, or do you have a look at it and see if things have changed, if the skill sets have changed, if the team dynamic needs a certain thing? That idea. They have to be able to look at how to measure and manage work. That's a low skill training area. Yay! The next one, conflict management. They have to be able to have a tough conversation. If they are starting to see groups, picking on people, or bullying, or any of those kinds of negative things, you see cliques of people getting together, you need to get involved in the middle of that immediately, because no good will come of that. And way too many organizations have got all these little splinter groups, and they actually sabotage one another. That is another low-level thing to train. Not a big deal. Perspective. You have to have, as a manager, you have to have perspective. You can't get all overwhelmed one day and then, sort of come out of the weeds the next day, so that you're emotionally up and down. You've got to put things in perspective. And hi, Sharon. Then the 7th thing is creativity. Creativity is paramount, because you have to be able to look out of the box, know when to look out of the box, know when to, and something different is going to be really refreshing for the team. It is not just doing the same old, same old. And creativity, there's lots of great ways to teach creativity, and that actually is one of those skills that is on the lower end of the spectrum. You can teach it. You can teach that. Now here's the backbreaker. Here's the one that don't try to teach it. You have to hire for it, is integrity. Integrity is paramount in a manager. That means they will always do the right thing. They'll do the right thing for the organization. They'll do the right thing for their people. And if they don't have it, it's very, very difficult to teach. It is listed as a very high complexity thing to teach. So there we have it. Those are, this is the first of a series of Facebook Live presentations that I want to do. I want to keep them at 20 minutes. I'm already at 25. Gotta go. But anyway, thank you so much for joining, and I will post this this video on LinkedIn, and I would ask that you share it with people you know. I really appreciate it. And if you have thoughts of things that you'd like to talk about in the manager area, that's what my thing is, then by all means. So, Judy McKenzie signing out. Take care. Bye-bye.